was sleeping a lot. The fatigue was huge. Brain fog was huge. I couldn't think clearly about anything at all. So
You mentioned
stomach issues were real icky. The worst period was a 7-day period of dizziness. In the last month, I've been riding with friends consistently. It's spring, so everything is green and beautiful. I'm just elated to be out there. I'm doing what I love. I'm riding with friends. I can drive an hour and ride and drive an hour home. And the big win over the weekend was I drove 2 hours to a friend who I had coached previously that's 2 hours away because I remembered a course we did out there and I wanted to see it while it was still green.
How's it going, Thrivers? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Dusty all the way from California, 73 years old, and she is absolutely crushing it on her CFS recovery journey. And she's actually biking about 50 miles a week at this point. And 2 years ago, she was struggling quite a bit. There were bouts where she was bedbound, bouts where she was having a very difficult time functioning. Even just walking to the mailbox was a struggle. But today she is, like I said, she is biking a lot, very active, and at this age, just crushing a lot of common beliefs that you can't recover in the later
Yeah.
stages of life. So Dusty, you want to quickly introduce yourself to everybody on here?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dusty. I live out in ranch country, a very quiet rural area with beautiful roads to ride on. I've been running and riding my bike all my life. I'm a retired PE teacher, so being active is my norm, and so that's who I am. And I've returned to acting, and I don't ride 50 miles a week. I'm currently riding about 140 miles a week. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
over several days. Yeah,
Got it. Got it.
yeah,
So yeah, this is going to be an absolutely awesome
yeah.
interview, super inspiring even for younger folks. Just the fact that you can go from bedridden or housebound to doing this amount of activity. Let's rewind the clock a little bit. You were dealing with this for a couple of years pretty intensely, but how did this all start? Did it hit you all at once, or kind of paint that picture for us?
Yeah, I was at the hotel to check in for a 200-mile bike race, and you have to do the COVID test, and suddenly I had COVID, and suddenly it wasn't just on the test, it was very physically in me. It was a very difficult next 2 to 3 months, I would guess, of dealing with the severity of being very weak and not being able to walk to the kitchen and not being able to handle light or sound, all of those strange symptoms that were very overwhelming at that time.
So it
Yeah.
hit you quite hard. It was a pretty quick onset because you were training, like you were in the mindset of, I'm going to do this 200-mile race, and then this thing kind of hits you. So was it a pretty fast progression?
I showed up at the hotel not knowing I was sick. I was busy checking in and seeing some people, and I went to bed, woke up the next morning, which was one day prior to the start of the bike race, feeling really kind of like, oh, gee, I might have a cold or something. I'm glad I showed up a day early because that means I can still go race tomorrow. And within hours, the severity of it hit. And I was lucky to be not in a rural area and be able to get urgent care and, diagnosis and all that stuff. So that shut that down. And I had to drive home on farm roads, pulling over about every half hour or so to, bar for cough or whatever. Once hit home, I was housebound for probably 6 weeks, something like that. Yeah. And I live alone. So it's created its own set of challenges, I would say, in terms of trying to eat enough or things like that.
Yeah. So what
Yeah.
kind of symptoms were hitting you in those first 6 weeks? And was it just snowballing, just getting worse
It
over
was
those?
snowballing, and mostly the severity was not being able to handle light or sound, any kind of noise. The lights were always off. I had to pull curtains, and I love the outdoors. So that was a very strange feeling of not being able to just look out the slider and enjoy my trees and stuff right outside. It was like too much. And I wondered how that could be. But I was too groggy to do very much wondering. I was sleeping a lot. The fatigue was huge. Brain fog was huge. I couldn't think clearly about anything at all. So yeah,
You mentioned
stomach issues were real icky. Everything. The just my general like nervous system. It was fidgety and fussy.
lots of dizziness. You said dizziness was one
Yeah,
of the first ones, right?
I would
Pretty.
say dizziness and brain fog were the two huge ones, and those would come and go over about in lesser degrees, finally, over about a 2-year period, I guess.
Mhm.
And that's completely gone since joining the academy. It was still there prior to the academy in smaller versions that laid out. 2 years out or a year and a half, something like that. But after joining the academy, that has gone and never come back. Yeah,
That's
learning how to deal was the answer. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So with the symptoms you were dealing with, I mean, how bad did they get? Were you at a point where you were bedridden and pretty much all you would do sometimes is just go to the washroom or have a bite and straight back to bed?
Yeah, definitely. And then the worst period, the most memorable, I guess I would say, was a 7-day period of dizziness that was so severe that I was leaning on the wall to walk to the kitchen, and then I would get there and I wasn't going to eat. There was nothing. And on the seventh day, I had just enough brains to realize this is wrong. It's getting worse, not better. So I called the EMTs, and at that point, I think I had somewhere in there, I had two ER visits in a row. And on the second one, I had some convulsion type of stuff. And they were concerned about POTS for about a second. And then they finally just dismissed me, said, everything's fine. You have vertigo. And I'm like, I came in telling you I'm dizzy. Now you exit me telling me I'm dizzy.
Yeah.
So that at that point is when I started trying, I had not much brain function. It would come and go. I started trying all the things I could find on Facebook, little devices and things. And it said something about the nervous system and the vagus nerve. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I know anatomy and I've never heard of as a PE teacher, know enough anatomy, but I've never really actually heard about the vagus nerve. But I didn't have the brains to think it through either. And I tried a number of strategies and devices that would help in the moment. Like,
Mhm.
for instance, deep breathing definitely helps, but it only helps in the moment. It doesn't address the cause, as did the other types of devices that would use stimulation and things like that, a wavelength or something like that. I found them helpful. They were kind of life saving for a while, but there was no addressing the cause. So, yeah, I would recover enough to think I could go ride my bike or go for walks. And then that period of building it up slightly would last anywhere from a few weeks to the longest one was almost 3 months. And that was a more solid one. And then it would fall apart again. So,
Yeah.
and the dizziness and the brain fog would return at a lesser level than they had been in the early days. Yeah. So it
Yeah.
followed the charts that you do in the program where it goes on an uphill curve. The dips are less awful and the gains are more each time. But it was hard to digest that without knowing your charts in the program
Yeah.
because there was no explanation for why I was going through a cycle at all. I'd been through a lot of other illnesses and injuries that took a long recovery time. And once it was done, then you would recover on a line that looked like this. I don't know how to make my hand do that in the video, but you would it would get better on a line that would move up. This one wasn't predictable that way.
Yeah.
So it was very confusing. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Especially when the symptoms come back, it almost feels like you're back at square one because, sometimes you're quite debilitated. The symptoms are there and you're thinking, I messed up, I overdid it,
Yes. Yeah.
done that, not realizing it is part of the process. It's
Right.
similar to, I think it really helped that you had a training background because to bike these far lengths, obviously you train up to it, you get sore, you go into these cycles of
Right.
training. So I think that's why it clicked really well for you. But in the beginning, how was it on your mindset being this athlete, being able to do all of these things and bike very far lengths to not even being able to walk outside your house or not being able to get fresh air? Like, what did that do,
Right.
man? Because that's a lot.
That was very tough. I In the beginning I assumed, it was COVID, so other racing friends said make sure you take it very carefully. It can be a little weird at first. So those things felt like I could handle. But when the cycle would repeat or when it got really bad, it was very difficult to understand. And yet I've known from the beginning that I would get well. Somewhere at about maybe 6 months out, I taped a little note on the toaster that says, I will be stronger. I will be stronger. And because I finally realized I was going to end up having to learn a lot. And so I would be stronger than I was before, which is definitely coming true. I've just always known, that's all I can say. I've always known, and I'm very tenacious in finding a way to get better. So that's why I would try several devices. And I was hopeful to get into one of the hospital programs that had COVID recovery programs, whatever they were calling that. And I was able to barely have enough brain function to study that, look into it. And the hospitals that offer it are anywhere from 1 to 2 hours away, and they're daily programs. So that wasn't an option, which turns out to be good because those programs apparently weren't very successful anyway. So
Yeah.
I kept trying things, and there were many days probably scanned through Facebook for hours at a time for entertainment. I couldn't take the TV, I couldn't take any noise on the property like a weed whacker or the weed blower sounds. It was horrific. I mean, I was putting on, whatever, but I tripped onto your program at somewhere along the line, and I'd been in holistic care for about, I think, a year at that point, and that helped resolve the stomach issues I was having, and it revived the nutritional deficits from not eating much of anything because I felt so awful.
Mhm.
But it had reached a point where it was becoming horrifically expensive and the gains just weren't still there. And at some point right in there, your 7-day free offer came up, and I thought, I have nothing to lose. And I'm tenacious. I will try everything that came my way. And I took that assessment on that first day thing or whenever that was. And right away, looking into the program, I just knew. I knew because it's the way it's presented, and I had just enough brain cells left to
Yeah.
be able to look into the modules and realize I can do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I learned a lot very quickly in that first 2 weeks. And it was hard. I was still dealing with brain fog then, but I'm really determined. So,
Yeah, you're
it,
very determined, and that's what
yeah,
stands out to me with you. At 73 years old, there's a lot of people who are in their 20s or 30s, and they think it's no, based on what I've read online, I don't think I'll ever have my life back. Like,
yeah,
sick with this forever. But you already came in with that thriver mentality of no, I will solve this. I'll do whatever it takes. And even though you tried so many things in the past, you just had the mentality of there is
yeah.
a solution. People are getting better, and I'm not going to stop until I find out.
Yes, yes. I just fully expected it, and I would work until I found it. And it's the same kind of tenacity that also would take me down
Yeah.
because I would overtrain. And then, prior to COVID, I would overtrain and then go through cycles of having mono several times. Well, having mono 3 times in your 50s and 60s, that's not normal. It's kind of, I should have somewhere read what that meant and backed off. And it wasn't until the program where I realized this was all a product of being on high alert for decades. And the more recent period of that had been my husband's caregiver. And he was a quadriplegic, which he did pretty well for the first 20 years, but the last 10 or 15, with a lot of surgeries and a lot of EMTs here all the time, I was on high alert all the time. And it was necessary then. And here I am when I got COVID, 6 or 7 years out from his passing, thinking I'm not on high alert anymore, but apparently my body was. Once that was in my brain, all of the pieces fit. And so here I am knowing, and that my nervous system is now calmed down. Noises, I'm out on bike rides that I don't know, 3 years ago, hay trucks would go by, which are extremely noisy and they blow you to the side. Nobody likes that. I was the one screeching and feeling like I was going to die, just hoping that I don't know, wouldn't get hit or blown off the road or whatever. Now a hay truck goes by and it's like, do I like it? No. Do I overreact?
Mhm.
It's just, there's just a sense of calm in me now, knowing how to allow the nervous system to find a peaceful place. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah. And you mentioned in those first couple of weeks, you joined the academy, seized the opportunity, because we were doing a 7-day trial for the academy. You came in, seized the opportunity, and it sounds like you dove right in. You watch the modules. And I
Yeah.
remember your first couple weeks, you were commenting, sharing wins, engaging. You were on the calls as well. So, what were some of the biggest things that clicked for you in those first couple weeks where you felt a shift? Was it just understanding what's going on, or
Yes. Yes. Both the modules, I was very impressed that they were lined up in digestible units.
Mhm.
And so I didn't have to, and actually my I remember messaging you guys. I didn't even, I'd never done Zoom calls. I didn't know how to find things like the microphone. I didn't know how to use your system in the beginning. So that was my struggle, is in how do I use it? Because once I would get into a module and you would explain a level of the nervous system in a compact, you all of your modules, you explain one thing at a time, and you keep it simple, and you use diagrams, simple diagrams. And on my good days, once I was feeling pretty good, which I felt pretty good prior to joining your program, but I knew something was off. I didn't have all the pieces yet. So I would look at other things that the support groups online, long COVID for endurance athletes was one. They would throw in science links every once in a while. And then I'd pull up this thing like, good God, I can't read all that. I
Confusing,
don't
right?
want all
Totally.
that. I want the concise version.
Yeah.
So that's what you presented. And that's just amazing to me. And so, sure enough, I'm watching that happen as I see other people in the Zoom calls. So, the Zoom calls, along with the video modules, are the reason that I am making the progress I am. I've got support from your coaches, and it's genuine, and they each have their own way of supporting us in their presentation of, their the way they are. Yeah, and then I hear other people's wins, and it's, if I'm getting maybe a little frustrated, I'm hearing somebody who's grateful to have been able to stand up and you go to the washroom without needing their walker. So it puts things in perspective very quickly. And I've always had an approach of gratitude, but that like doubled just being in a program with that wide of a, yeah.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective, like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
having a rough day, but you look at someone else's day and they're grateful
Yeah.
they do something like that. But
Right.
very powerful too that you also see people who have been sick for years and then you see them progressing, you know,
Yeah.
1 month, 2 months, then you see all these wins and somebody,
Yeah.
wow, first time I traveled in 3 years, or
Yeah.
first time having lunch with a family at a restaurant in 2 years. Like it
Right.
shows you that wow, there's some forward progression in all these people. So I'm on the right path. I'm on the right
Yeah.
track here.
Yeah.
Just
Well, and I learned a lot of little pieces, like I didn't know that I had set so many limitations in the way that I did things. Well, I think when your world kind of closes down, you tighten up how you do it so that you don't like mess up. So there was one of my non-physical wins was spontaneously doing things, spontaneously running into a friend, in the market, and saying, "Hey, do you want to get a cup of coffee or something?" Like actually saying, "Let's sit down and chat." That was not in my personality before all of this ever happened. There's just differences. I spontaneously had a restaurant salad bar after 3 years of eating nothing but what I prepared at home. And it was just due to a friend on a phone call saying, "Hey, we have to go. We're going over to Round Table to get the salad bar. They have a really nice salad bar." And I'm like, there was a click. It's like, I remember that from like 5 years ago. Why don't I just go do that? And I thought, okay, I'm going to use that as a future win, because that's what we call him in, Miguel's program. Let's set up some future wins. And as soon as I'm saying it, I'm kind of putting it on the back burner,
Yeah.
like it doesn't matter. And I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I just say it doesn't matter? Why don't I just go get a salad like other people do? And a couple days later, I'm, in that particular shopping area, and I'm like, it's 4 in the afternoon. I'm like, hey, I could spontaneously do a thing. I could eat dinner. That was like huge to me. I don't know why it would be so big, but doing things differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
you are very strong on saying, most of you guys that you use your watch and you keep your stats all day long, quit doing that. Well, there are a couple other programs I was a part of where you tracked your stats every day. And then you could see your progress. I mean, I found that really valuable. You had a heart monitor on your arm, and you could, it was helpful in the beginning. Later on, I could make the connection of, wow, he's asking me to not keep my stats. I mean, I might come from sports. We keep stats on everything. So I let some of that slide. And that was kind of a big deal for me to take off one of the, take off the extra heart rate monitor and only use the watch one. I'm like, well, I won't tell Miguel I'm still using stats a little bit. Yeah, just a different approach, a more relaxed human approach, as opposed to kind of feeling robotic with most of it,
Yeah,
stats and stuff like that. So
that's
yeah,
why people, fall into this stuff in the first place. One of the behavioral patterns is being very structured, very analytical, and a lot of times very, having this perfectionist mindset. Also, this all or nothing mindset, especially if
yeah,
athlete,
right.
especially like a high level athlete. You're biking hundreds of miles at per week, per month.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
used to being structured. You almost need that structure. And for a lot of us, that analytical mind, it's helped us with our careers or
right,
any
right.
accomplishments, but it can definitely backfire during recovery.
Yeah, yeah. That was a tough one for me to understand, because if you're doing an endurance race, stats and planning are the key to success. Managing the nutrition, managing the hydration, all the things. But I can see that I mean, I had lists, a lot of lists, packing and time. I had timesheets that were stuck on the bike, and it's kind of like they were useful then. I do not need them now. I do not need that same approach because today I'm not in a bike race. Today
Exactly.
I'm here. Yeah. So if I go back to that, and I'm not positive whether I will or not, but I already know that I would be using stats differently. And there was one time early on one of those, it was a 12-hour race, and my crew chief, you start at 5 in the morning, so it's dark on your first lap out there. And then you come around and you get water or whatever. And I yelled to my crew chief, I said, I don't think my Garmin is working. My little bike computer's not working. And I was like, how am I going to know how fast I'm going? I mean, we've got 12 hours of this. It's not just a short race. And
Yeah.
he says, ride with joy. And I did. And it didn't matter. And that's years ago. And that came back to me as in maybe I don't need the stats anyway. We're sold this in this day and age to keep track of everything. And I don't know that we need to keep track of everything.
Over planning or thinking too far ahead versus being a little more spontaneous, just like you
Yeah.
said. I'm
Yeah.
the same way now. I used to over plan almost everything. Like, for example, when I
Yeah.
travel, I'm traveling right now in a different country. I kind of just show up with no plan and I'm just like, let's just enjoy every single day, start
Yeah.
this time. But it turns out to be very stressful versus just kind of I've learned to go with the flow a little bit more and
Yeah.
done wonders for my nervous system. There's no way
Yeah.
I could do everything I'm doing right now and be symptom free throughout all of this. So I think my nervous system, well, I know it's a lot more resilient than it used to be. You know, but
I think so, yeah.
yeah,
I will come back stronger. That's what the message on my toaster said 3 years ago, and I would look at it on the really dark days. There were some very dark days, and I would look at that and wonder, but my gut always knew it was true, and it would be up to me to get there because clearly the EMT system didn't know. So, yeah, once I knew that I remember knowing this is up to me. They can't fix this. And it took 2 ERs in a row, which is on its own extremely stressful that you have to recover from. So, yeah. And I also, somewhere through the program, realized one day that I don't need to know yet. That's just a phrase. I don't need to know yet. If I go back to being able to go back to wanting to travel to some races, the where are we going to stay? I don't need to know yet. I don't need to know all the details ahead. Yeah. So then you have more energy to live as opposed to keeping track of all the stuff. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I think a lot of it too, it's like you just have more self confidence, especially once you learn how recovery works, the science of what's happening
Yes.
to your body.
Yes.
You almost like when you're doing an activity, you understand there's probably going to be an adjustment period, but you trust, your future
Yes.
self to be able to handle that because you
Yeah. And
do it.
that took a while because the symptoms in the earlier rounds of writing again, I can look back and realize I probably shouldn't have been writing yet at that point based on what was, because it took a while to be able to drive an hour to ride the trails with a friend. And I remember when I would get back in the car to drive home, the trail is really fun. So you think you feel great. And then you get back in the car, and I remember kind of a crushing headache and an eye strain feeling. And sometimes I would get back in the car thinking, God, too bad I can't just take a nap first before I drive home. And it didn't occur to me that at the time until later that maybe I had done too much. Now those kinds of symptoms aren't there, and I can see the difference between what it feels like after a normal bike ride, which is where I am now, and what those some of those earlier stages were. And I
Mhm.
didn't know that I was doing too much because in my book it was so little compared. So it's
Yeah.
just all part of the learning process.
Yeah. And
I just yeah.
I think you're
My
more.
goal Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think you just become more in tune with, you know,
Yes.
your threshold. It's all about the
Yes.
threshold and
Yes.
managing that,
I
you know.
remember that word ringing true at several points along the way. The I can't remember the hyper vigilance threshold or whatever what is that one called?
It's like pretty
Stress
much,
threshold.
yeah, stress
Yeah.
stress. You can feel
That
it.
made sense to me.
Yeah.
That clicked. The little steps along the way in the modules suddenly made sense. Yeah. And so stress threshold along with cycling threshold. And my goal on the earlier rounds, because I was lonely. I mean, I lived by myself. There'd already been 2 years of no events during the lockdown. And then shortly after that, I got in, I think it was one event, two events by the end of the year, and then bam. So in total, it was 4 or 5 years of not
Mhm.
really seeing. I haven't seen my international race friends for 5 years now. Well, that's a long time. So I lost my train of thought. It was I just always knew. That's all I can say. I just always, well, my goal was I just want to ride 50 miles with my friends. And other ill people would say 50 miles. And to me, that was like because your friends don't want to go for a 30-mile ride. That's too short for them. So I knew that that would be a real place and I would see my friends. So in this last 2 months, I think I've been with the Academy 3 months, maybe at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the last month, I've been riding with friends consistently. And
Mhm.
it's spring, so everything is green and beautiful. So I'm just elated to be out there. I'm doing what I love. I'm riding with friends. I can drive an hour and ride and drive an hour home. And the big win over the weekend was I drove 2 hours to a friend who I had coached previously that's 2 hours away because I remembered a course we did out there and I wanted to see it while it was still green. And I knew going into it that it would be maybe a bit of a stretch, but very doable. So, because it was 2 hours drive, 3.5 hours out on the bikes, and 2 hours drive home. And I didn't get the heavy fatigue until I was about 20 minutes from home, which was a huge win. So, yeah, those things, because there's the physical, which I prioritize, and then there's the social,
Yeah, your
yeah,
physical is like through the roof. So then the cognitive is just gonna it's gonna
yeah.
pick up over time.
And again, you had charts for that. So I don't have to like worry about it. It's just going to be in its own time. And if I want it to be quicker, then I'm going to have to read more. I
Yeah.
still don't do a lot of reading. I haven't picked up a book in several years now because I don't have I don't want to read a book because I can't absorb that much information. It's too many words, too many pages. So, but that part will come along if I prioritize it. So, yeah. I can
Exactly.
function in the world, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yeah. So, when people hear about all the things you're doing and the biking and how active you are, and a lot of them think, wow, they're invincible superheroes. They don't feel, they just had a smooth ride to recovery. How did they do it? Like
No,
alien. So tell us, like, when you had those APs, when you're starting out, and even 3 months ago when you were learning all this stuff, how did you, what was going through your mind when you had those APs, and what would you tell yourself to uh to get through those APs?
the ones prior to the academy were very concerning because there was no explanation other than, gee, I must have done it wrong. This is
Yeah.
on me. I rode too far or whatever. And so that was very disconcerting because I thought I had planned it, built it up carefully. And since joining the academy, there's been a better understanding of what the downswings, which are you call APs, really are. And I don't even use the word symptoms, I use the word sensations, because
Mm,
to me, symptoms it means that I'm still sick,
these are bad.
and sensations are a little less of an edgy word. And part of me is the hypersensitivity is having dealt with my husband's medical issues for decades. And in the last 5 to 10 years, incredibly at a high level. The last thing I wanted was to be where I ended up, where I was in ERs and where I was taking pills and supplements and scans. I would show up at the same hospitals he'd been at, and now I'm the person getting the lab work. I had reactions just to that. So once I was in the academy, and that stage was long gone by then, but once I was in the academy, the going backwards is not considered going backwards. It's a response of the nervous system to what the experience was. And I've seen that's where the big fuss is on the Zoom calls, because the people who've been there longer than I have take it for granted. And they've used the phrase, I'm going to take my symptoms with me. And I was like, wait, what? I don't want any symptoms. So I've learned a different way of managing that and not being fearful of it. Because there was a period where all the what ifs. And now it's like there's just a difference in how I choose to do something now and how I go into it. And looking at the stats less often actually prevents the sensation from happening anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
I
alluded to
realize I have way too expensive of a watch here. It's kind of like it's got way too much on it. And so I use it much less, and I will go whole days and I'm like, gee, I wonder how my energy level is, because I haven't checked it in like 4 hours. That wasn't happening. I've had the watch, this particular one, for a year and a half now. That wasn't happening all of last year. I would check it like all day long. It
mm,
was like having a coach standing right there over me all the time. So now it's kind of like it doesn't even occur to me. And during the early on bike rides, I would be very aware of, we have to start really early in the morning while I still have lots of energy. Like, I was like, and so then I'm placing limitations on what my friends can do with me when I'm the one who wants to do the things with them
mhm.
under my terms. So that's not going to work. So yeah, anyway, all those little details, I learned more about how the nervous system responds and why. And I learned really that I hadn't been on overdrive just from sports, that there had been, like with so many of the thrivers, a setup for that was prior hypersensitive, created a hypersensitive nervous system from childhood or from early on experiences or whatever. And so then things became more logical and doable. And
Yeah.
it actually lifted the need to wish that my past hadn't been as it was, because it was what it was. And now I'm more capable of letting it be not an issue,
Mm,
because when it's an issue, it's because my nervous system is talking. So it doesn't do that over those kinds of things anymore. There were
good.
other oddball alerts that would ring up something from decades back, and that's not happening anymore. So
Yeah.
there's just an overall calmness in me. And Junior and I had a really nice coach. Junior is a really great coach, and he and I had a really nice one-on-one, and I was starting to do pretty well at that point. And I said, but I think that part of the issue of these lifelong ups and downs is that when I'm feeling really good, I'm feeling really, really, really good. And I feel like I'm using up energy, even just driving to an event, because I'm so excited to be there. And yet I love the event. So of course I'm excited to be there. And he kind of walked me through talking that down a little bit. And at some point I said, I think I might be using too many exclamation points, because I'm so happy. And I've told people over the decades, I think I was just born with an extra happy gene. I mean, that's my personality. And he said, well, maybe just use one exclamation point. So I keep that phrase in the back of my head. And when I post something that I'm extra happy about in your academy, I'll say, don't let Junior look. I'm using two exclamation points because this one is really great. But I am physically hearing that voice and toning it down some. One of my symptoms, you asked, one of my creepy symptoms for decades had been electricity in my arms. And I remembered I would be driving to something and I could feel that electricity in my arms, thinking, this is great because I have a lot of energy today. And I didn't think of it as a bad thing. And now I'm like, whoa, that's not right. That was a tension. That was a nervous system thing. And that was there for a long time before I ever had COVID. So COVID COVID didn't break me, COVID made me. COVID is making me walk through this process, and I will be stronger. And you've mentioned that to many of the people who go through the beyond recovery end of things, which is where I'll go in the next month or so, because I loved my life, but I don't want it to be exactly like that anymore. I want it to be different. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
powerful.
can't thank you enough. It's been all of the coaches are amazing and they operate differently. So you get different types of input and they're all very sincere and they've all been through what we've been through. So they're real. I'm very grateful. You guys run a really good program.
Yeah, thank you very much, and you're very welcome. We show you guys the roadmap, we give you the different tools, and then it's up to you guys to use the tools and follow that roadmap. And you've done a phenomenal job with it. But something you mentioned, I want to highlight. It's when you went through those adjustment periods, you saw them as sensations, not so much symptoms. And that's the way I saw it
Yeah.
as well. I didn't even call them symptoms. Well, my mom or my grandma, she was like, "How are you feeling today? Are you feeling those symptoms?" This was like 3 or 4 months after the hospital, but I'm still learning to walk for long distances again.
Yeah.
I just said, now I feel some stuff. It's fine, and I didn't put a good or bad label on it. It was just
Yeah.
basically a scientific reaction in my body. It's just that's all it is. It's sensations. It may feel scary, may feel bad, but it's not like your nervous system is out there to get you or to punish you.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
a reaction. It's just science.
And
And
I learned to talk to my nervous system. I had never thought of it that way. I've I've always appreciated that my legs are strong enough to do what I love. And there's a well known pro racer who uses the phrase shut up legs. And I thought, why would he say that? I mean, he's a pro racer, he does the Tour de France. Obviously, he knows what he's doing. Shut up legs was his way of getting to that finish line first. For me, it was like, I remember I would never talk to my legs like that because I love that my legs will get me to the finish line. I'm not going to yell at them, but I'd never talk to my nervous system. And that was new for me. And it's explained both in your program specifics and in the calls that people voice how they phrase it, that the nervous system is a is my friend, just like my heart and my lungs. And I didn't even know it existed as a thing that I needed to address or as a personality. So
yeah,
now it is a personality. And I often now, well, I am finally sleeping better than I have in my whole life. And I have finally learned an evening routine to create that. And that took most of a year to figure out. And it sped up once I was in the program, even though we don't really talk much about sleep. That was a key for me. And being in the program was another piece of me putting that together. I was doing well, but I wasn't sleeping well. And again, that would be up to me. So I've kind of created an evening routine with an early-ish dinner, a walk when the weather cools off, just a calming sense of things to
mhm,
create that. Whereas when you're, I don't know, in the prime of your life, and especially for people raising kids and those kinds of things, they, when they finally go to bed, they just drop into bed and bam, they're done. There is no routine. And so I kind of kept that style, even though I was retired. So I'm sleeping better. So, of course, I'm going to be feeling better and the sensations and those kinds of things. But talking to my nervous system and naming it, I spell it out as ENZI, which is NZ, which is NS. Enzy is my friend, and I talk to Enzy. And when I'm out on my bike, in a solo section of the ride, I'm like, thank you, Ennis, for letting me do these things. It's like, and I've often said, thank you, heart and lungs. I am so happy out here. And so now I've got like a third a third personality to talk to, and it's Enzi who's actually running the show.
Mhm.
And it amazes me to have lived this long and not known that, but live and learn. So
Funny.
keep doing your 7-day free trials, because
Yeah.
my earlier look at one of your videos about a year earlier on, and that's when I had more brain fog, but I remember kind of glancing into it because it looked like that might be my answer. And I remember seeing the $6,000 full year pricing on it. And I just set it aside because I didn't need a full year. I was almost done, which wasn't the case. But about a year later, the 7-day thing came along and I was still struggling. And bam, that was all I needed. And I've suggested it to a couple of friends and several athletes. And I'm hoping that they will take advantage of that because there's no risk. I
Mhm.
figured by that time I'd spent a lot trying to find an answer, and I didn't need the full year full on program. I went in with a monthly program that's working very well at a very affordable price. um, and I couldn't have done the one where it's the lower end one where I'm reading all the modules on my own because I didn't have the capacity for that. But you've got it set up for whomever needs whatever level, and so
That'd be
I
great.
was really grateful.
That 7-day trial, I think it's so powerful. So now we just keep
Yeah,
that open. Like, in the description below this video, we're gonna have a link there. And that's really what it's for. It's for people to, because they've tried so many different things that obviously didn't work. That's why
yeah,
they're watching the videos. So this is a way to try it completely for free, just to make sure it works for you. But at
yeah,
least you'll get a chance to try it. And then if it does work, which it does with most people, and it could totally change the trajectory.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And having the nervous system assessment is a very visual way of, because in the other program with the heart rate monitor, I think it was Visible Plus program, it was very useful, other than the fact that I was constantly recording. And so I saw over month to month that I was making gains because it listed the symptoms that were the most problematic. And last month they were this high, and this month they're only this high, kind of thing. So I remember feeling pretty comfortable knowing I was getting there. But um, in the end, I was never gonna, I don't think ever gonna get out because it stayed symptom oriented. It's valuable at a certain point. There was also a couple of Facebook support pages, but two of them were very clear that you are not going to get out of this and you're going to need to manage it, and you're going to be managing your whole life. And by the way, if you try to do too much, you are going to end up in the dark room, and that's where you will stay. So, was fear a part of it? Yes. The whole recovery of trying to get back on the bike and thinking, okay, I'm going to be the one who pops out of this. And then it didn't last. I'm like, oh, crud, they were right.
mhm.
You know, so the fear was huge. So as I started lessening my emphasis on them, I would mute them for 30 days in case I needed them to, in case things didn't go well. And at least 30 days down the road, they would pop back up and they would be there if I needed them. And now I don't follow them anymore. It's not working. And I didn't go back on their page to say, you're nuts. That's not how it really works. I mean, that's not up to me to do that. But they were helpful emotionally for a while at a certain level. And then the negativity there was, and there were a handful of us that were, back to exercising, and the other people saying, "Oh no, you got to be really careful. This could be with you forever." And I thought, and there was a point before the program, probably 2 months before the program, the reason I got the watch with all the stats was I'm going to need this because I will probably be managing this for the rest of my life. I'm in my 70s, so it's not like it's going to eventually evaporate. I remember that. And now it's like, heck no, that is not the way it's going to be. So, yeah. So, and I have registered for a 12-hour race and a 6-hour race in November. It's a world championship time trial. I've won it, I think, 4 different times. And
Wow.
I've registered the last few years thinking, surely I'll be out of this. It's all the way to November. And by the time it gets there, it's like, I can't even drive to the race and stay overnight, let alone get on the bike to do it. This year, it's different. I know I will be there. I will see my international friends again. You guys gave me my life back, and it's not back, it's growing and it's going to expand. And
Better.
yeah, I'm amazed. I'm thrilled. I'm amazed. I'm grateful. All the things.
It's amazing.
There
It's
aren't
it's
enough exclamation points for you, but don't tell Junior.
that's amazing. We got to get you like a Thriver singlet or something, for the
Yeah, yeah,
years.
yeah.
That would be epic.
I
It.
am, see it? I'm wearing it every day.
Yeah.
The
One
bracelet.
mind shift
It's
away.
huge, by the way. It goes almost all the way on
Yeah.
my arm. But
I think I sent you a large one.
I look at it and realize if somebody asks how I'm doing, I will just say I'm thriving. I just love the word. I don't need to go into any other details. That explains it all. I love the choice of word, and I love using it as a one word answer to how have you been doing? You look good. And I've got all kinds of people who've said, wow, you are looking good. You were looking kind of gray back then. And I'm like, really? You know, well, one of my first big gains was to drive myself to the coffee house that's 3 miles from here, because that would be the only person I would talk to all day. And it was 3 miles away, and I could handle that. And she was always very friendly, and she's kind of always been there as she's a pleasant person, and now we know each other very well. And she's so supportive that she makes specially really healthy low sugar cookies for me because she was concerned I wasn't eating enough. So that's the kind of friend she became. And one day I had my first that I could drive myself to a doctor appointment, which was 3 miles. She's 3 miles from home. He was 3 miles further down the road. So I thought, I can do this. I got to the stoplight where she is, and I looked in that direction and thought, God, I'm really tired. I don't know if I can drive that far. That's the level I operated at way back then. I can't even imagine that now. You
Yeah.
know, I drive wherever I want. I drive the roads that I ride on, and I can hear myself saying, I'll be back. I said it over and over and over, I'll be back. And some of those days I was really tired coming home from a doctor appointment. I remember feeling really droopy, and it's like, it's okay, I'll be back. And I'm out on those very roads again. So, and I've joined group rides again. So I see people. So I've got my social interactions back, because it's a very isolating thing when you
Yeah.
don't feel good. And if you live alone, then you don't see anybody. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and you lose a bit of your identity too. Like if you're
yeah,
used to going to the gym or seeing the same people in similar environments, but all of a sudden you can't do those things, you're kind of like stripped of this identity. So if
yeah,
you're sick, you're maybe mentally you were a cycler because you were visualizing it, but physically, you're cooped up at home. But I think
yeah,
it's where having that vision, having a grander vision,
yeah.
and it doesn't have to be biking 100 miles, just something,
Whatever the thing. Yeah.
whatever it is.
I think it's important to have something out there. I've also gone back to my creative work. I had a graphic design business prior to being a PE teacher. And so I've always had sort of a freelance art
Mm,
thing going on. But I'm back to painting again, paintings, drawings, projects, mosaics, things like that. That as a retired person, it's just really nice to have that creativity back. So it's not all one sided. And there are times when I realize that too much cycling is an imbalance. And so being able to balance the two has always been a little bit tricky. And
mhm.
so I'm finding a little bit of a cleaner balance with that than I had a few years ago. Yeah, it's, life is good. And then it's like, life is grand. That old life is good doesn't really cover it. Life is grand. And I'm, I'm going to be fine. And I'm alert again, all that stuff. And I can do stuff. So now it's a little bit about one of my other goals is to do something special for my 74th birthday in a couple of months. And it's common to ride your miles, your age in miles.
Mm,
And so 74, so the older you get, the farther you got to ride. So, but it's never been a big deal. And last year I was well enough to do 74 kilometers, which felt like because it's only about a little more than half as far. And that was actually too much. I went into a slump right after that, probably an AP or something. But this year, it's like if I have to do 74 Ks, that'll be okay. I would really like to do 74 miles, but I don't need to know yet. It's still 3 months away.
Mhm.
It will fall into place, and it's like it won't be a letdown. It will just be what I let it be. I will create it the way I want it. And I want to celebrate it with friends. So, and I've never really done birthdays before. I don't celebrate birthdays. But this year I'm thinking this one might be kind of special because I feel renewed.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
powerful. What I love about you is, there's a lot of people when they get this, I've said this earlier as well, that they feel like this is going to be for the rest of their life. And there's not a lot of excitement about the future. It's more so like, okay, I'm just going to be surviving for the rest of my life. But you, it's like, it's almost like a renewed energy in your sense.
Yes.
There's so
Yeah.
much, the sense that there's so much to look forward to. There's so much
Yes.
left to live.
Well, and the reason it hit that hard is my aunt died somewhere in this process a couple years ago, and she lived to be 100. And she and I got close in her last decade or so, maybe 15 years or so, when I was driving her to some of appointments and things like that. And we had a lot of similarities. And she's the only relative I have who I'm grateful that I have her genes. It's like I'm not a family oriented person, and I don't look back at that stuff, but I'm glad I connected with her. And I do indeed have a lot of personality similarities. And so she lived to be 100. And she actually didn't exercise a lot. Although in her last decade, she would call me. Well, I would call her and she didn't have time to chat because she had to get down and play um, bingo or whatever it was with in the place she lived in.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have time to chat. I have to go play bingo. And I'm like, wow, is that cool? She was in her late 90s. She had to go do something fun
Yeah.
downstairs. So if she lived to be 100 and I have her genes, the thing that actually turned it around for me when it got really dismal was I cannot do this for the next 30 years. I can't. That's when it got really dark and dismal. And over that next day or two, because the brain fog is so thick, you can't think your way out. But I knew it was up to me because the doctors kept saying everything's fine, which I'm grateful for. I had scarred lungs and I don't know, two things in my lungs, but um, that the last scan this year says that that's healed. My heart was fine, and I have the last visit he cleared that once again. He wants to do it annually now. So the one I went in for in the last month or two felt like a complete waste of time to me because it's like clear to me my heart is fine. But to hear him say it, you have a big and very healthy heart. Okay, then I'm going to go ride my bike. My lungs are in line as well, and I am not going to just sit around and knit baby booties for the next 25 years. You know, I I expect to feel good. That's my expectation. And I think many of our thrivers expect exactly that. And so they will figure out a way to find it. And
Absolutely.
a lot of people are so overwhelmed that they've given up. And I don't know, it's just a part of my personality that says I don't give up. When you ride 200 miles, you learn not to give up.
Mhm.
There's no other way to put it. And I rode those kinds of distances. I started in a different level of racing, a different type of racing, but um, I got curious. Somebody mentioned a race across Nevada, which is 400 miles, and I got curious as to what that might be like. And I was sure I wasn't interested in it. I was just chit chatting while we were on a ride. But I asked enough questions that by the time I'm putting my bike back in the car, I'm like, I'm gonna have to look into that. So then it's kind of you might as well pay the entry fee that day and that was curiosity,
Yeah,
and that's I think my aunt had a lot of curiosity, and so that's a thriver
absolutely. That
piece is curiosity. What can I do next? What will it be like?
yeah,
Yeah.
that is absolutely the thriver mentality. So just wrapping up here, if there's people watching this right now and they're in just a dark place, kind of where you were, 3 years ago, but maybe on top of that, they're thinking, can I ever get better? Is it even possible? What if I can't do it? What are some words of inspiration you would like to share with them or words of hope to encourage them?
I would say you can if you want to, and you have to want it bad enough to learn how to do it. It's truly not as complicated as the medical system would make it out to be.
Yep.
You have to want it bad enough to learn how to do it. And same as, I don't know, playing the piano. Can I play the piano? Well, no, but if I sat down and learned how, then I could play the piano. So now I had to learn how to get well. And in
Yep.
the end, I wasn't physically sick anymore. The biggest thing that I learned, one of the big things, is that I am not sick. You guys have made that clear. Once we've been medically cleared with the scans and all the stuff, because I had a friend and I was kind of whiny, and she has diabetes that she's had all her life. And her comment at some point was, it is tough learning how to manage a chronic illness. And I'm like, wait, what? I didn't agree to that. I mean, it's kind of like, well, not, no, who said anything about that? I thought I was supposed to get well. I didn't say any of that. It's just what was going on here. And since I'm not recovering from long COVID because I have no physical heart and lung issues, then I am not ill. I am well.
Mhm.
If I am well, then I am healthy. And if I'm healthy, I can learn how to thrive. I think that's what I would say. And learning how is not doing it on my own. I had to learn what the nervous system is. I don't know how many people pay that much attention to their nervous system. Nobody ever tests it.
No.
Nobody tests your nervous system. So why would we even be talking about it? And yet it's running the show. And I think it's important to figure that part out. So that's what I would say.
I
You
love
know,
it.
if you want to thrive, then you have to be willing to learn how to do it.
Yeah, and the other thing, that goes along with that is that nobody's going to come along and fix it for you. I think
Correct.
a
Yeah.
lot of times we're looking for that external thing because, I mean, usually when you get sick, you could take medicine or a supplement, or you
Right.
break your leg, you go to the hospital, they'll help you fix it. But once you've crossed out all of those different options and clearly, everything is functioning fine on paper, that's when you can be pretty confident, it's highly likely a hypersensitive nervous system
Right.
issue.
And I
And
think it's far more common
yeah,
among people who haven't even had long COVID, people who don't even officially have CFS,
yep.
that but they don't know it yet. And I see, people in their 40s and 50s. I've got neighbors who are raising kids, so they're way younger than me. And their cars is they're never home. They've got several kids, so they're in their different activities. So it's a very active life. And I'm thinking, wow, I must really be old because that looks really overwhelming to me. And then I look back when I was at that age and I wasn't raising kids, but I was doing a very active life and balancing all the things. That's a setup for doing too much.
Yeah.
And now I can hear conversations with individuals in the past who I can tell either they've already been through something like this or they've never really done it the way I did it. They were
Yeah.
always a calmer, more take it as it comes person, because I'm surrounded by ultra endurance athletes who do okay, so they race across America. There's a 3,000-mile race on your bike across America with your van following you to give you jackets and water and food and stuff, but the clock never stops. So they
Extreme.
have 12 days total to get across the country. The winners take 7 or 8. They sleep 45 minutes here and there. For reals. That's for reals. That's the people that I know in this sport. And I'm like, and I've had people say, so when are you going to enter the 24-hour? I'm like, are you nuts? That's crazy. I go to sleep at night. I ride when the sun's out. You guys are the crazy ones. So I'm at the low end of that group in terms of how they run. So that's actually one of the things that makes it hard for me to realize that I don't need to be like them or compare any of that. And I'm not lesser than those kinds of things. And I can't expect to do what they do because that's not what I'm doing. Maybe they're built differently. I don't know, but
Yeah.
they're good friends, and so I'm around that mentality. But I notice that many of them are calm in their approach,
Mm.
and I don't know that I've been calm. I've always been the excited one. I love racing. I love the feeling of being there. So yeah,
It's amazing what the human body is capable of when you
yeah,
have a regulated nervous system.
yeah, yeah,
When they're not racing, their nervous system is recovering. it's being able to bounce back. Whereas
Yeah.
aren't regulated, they just be on 24/7, if not physically, then maybe mentally and emotionally, but
Right.
they have those other areas. For you, my last question is,
Sure.
and this might be a rhetorical question, but would you say it's been a good investment joining the Recovery
Oh,
Academy?
absolutely. Of course. And in the end, I would have paid double or triple, you know. Yeah. I mean, I have my life back. And I kept making the attempt, thinking it was there, and then it was not. And the discouragement of that cycle without understanding it is really devastating because my friends are out there riding their 50 miles and I'm still not with them. That's what was going through my mind. Or I would get in one ride that I would carefully build up to, and then things would fall apart. So, yes, it's absolutely worth, and I haven't found anything other that works. And I've tried all the gadgets. I would go into debt to get my health back. And so that's the approach I took. And the fact that you have it at the level that different people need it based on where they are, yeah. And it's digestible. So the people with brain fog, you've taken all that into account. The fact that you've all been through it means you know how to present it. So I'm extremely grateful that when you regained your health, this is what you chose to do. Yeah.
Most fulfilling thing I could do to see, cases just like this, like your journey, that's what makes it all worth it, because it's real people, real stories, real
Yeah.
struggles, but real achievements as well, real people going from surviving to thriving. And
To
that's
thriving. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I'm very grateful.
yeah.
I just
So
didn't want to settle for less. And there was periods where I thought I might have to settle for less. Logically, I might have to settle for less. And I was just still looking for the answer before I made that decision. And that's when your program appeared. So now I know I don't have to settle for less. Am I going to go race across the country on my bike? No. Am I going to go do 200 miles? I don't know yet because I entered both races at the end of the year. I don't care which ones I do. I just know that I know I'm healthy enough to show up and get on my bike for one or both. And I'll see all my friends again. So the other fun little twist with the Zoom is it's all over the world, so we get accents from all over the world.
yeah.
I don't know what it is I love about that, but that's one of the things I like about racing internationally is there's accents. I love knowing that it's not just me in my corner. It's everybody in the world is part of this. And
Mm.
everybody in the world is like part of my race world. And then suddenly you realize that accents proves that out very quickly. And I just love that. And the fact that your program is available worldwide is just amazing to me. So yeah, it's just a little bonus. It makes you feel a little less alone.
Absolutely.
This journey is not cultural. It's not a small group of people. It's worldwide. And yeah.
Global.
And there's
So
a joy in your program. The way things are presented, there's a joy. I look forward to clicking and opening it. You know, it's what it's kind of like what Facebook used to be. When you could click and open and your friends were there instead of whatever's there now. So yeah, yeah, very. I don't want to leave the academy, by the way, ever.
yeah,
I
well,
don't know exactly how I'll play that out, but I'm
see
like,
you
if
in
I go
recovery.
into the next level, do I still get to maintain my contacts with my people?
You're
You
still in
know?
the same community, still in the same academy, and it
Yeah,
just takes us to beyond recovery.
yeah, yeah,
It's amazing. It's a
yeah.
powerful story. Really appreciate you sharing this with
Well,
us.
thank you.
I know there's so much more to your story. We'll do another one, later this year after your 200-mile
Oh,
race.
after that, yeah, yeah,
It's
that'd be
gonna be
fun. Yeah.
amazing.
I might have tears on that day. Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
will. Probably
Happy
will.
tears. Well, and that would be a good thing because I've wondered that in some of our video calls of because I haven't cried in probably 20 years. My tears were used up through the difficulties of my husband's illness. And I could not cry because I had things to take care of. And so every once in a while, since joining the program, I've thought, I wonder if that would ever come back because there are times I feel so good that I almost feel in tears as I'm out on my bike or driving home, and yet not. And sure enough, that topic has come up a few times. So I've thought, okay, well, just let it be. It sounds like maybe because that's an emotional piece.
Tears of
So,
gratitude.
all right.
It'll
Well,
be
we'll
great.
stay connected.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you guys watching this right now, hope you guys got a lot out of this amazing it was over an hour long chat, but
Oh, wow.
73 years old, right? And she was at the point where she was very severe, lots of intense symptoms, with by herself, very extreme light and sound sensitivity, couldn't
Yeah.
even leave the house. And
Yeah.
here she is riding her bike again. So, I hear it a lot. People ask me, can I recover? Miguel, is it possible? Am I going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life? Watch this video over again. This is
Yes.
proof
Certainly.
that you can absolutely make a comeback. And if Dusty can do it, you can definitely do it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so it is possible, and you guys keep fighting. The whole reason you're watching this video right now in the first place is you have that thriver
Yeah.
mentality inside you. There is a way out. It's just a matter of getting there. It's going to take some work, but it's going to be worth it a million times over once you cross that whole CFS journey
Yeah.
and you close a
Yeah.
chapter on that. So that whole Recovery Academy 7-day trial, at least at the time of this video or when we release this, it's going to be in the link below. You can try it completely for free, just like Dusty did, and it could be the thing that changes the trajectory of your whole recovery
Yep.
journey. So I'm
Yep.
going to leave that down below. You guys are awesome. Dusty, you're awesome. Always remember, you are a thriver, and you're just one mind shift away
Yep.
living a life with thriving health.
Let's say that CFS recovery is absolutely the real deal.
I actually felt like somebody had an answer, like somebody explained what was going on, and it all clicked.